Hey guys, welcome to my bonus workshop of my full baking day. So normally I do these baking days in the morning. Right after breakfast, I'll, put away, clean up breakfast and get everything out. And in my life, that is just in the middle of our normal routine. We have 5 young kids, and so my baking day is them coming in and out, them playing outside. They might watch a little TV. They might come and help me and then wander off and come back and help me. So for me, it ends up being a lot of stop and get a snack, do this, and that's always just incorporated. For your guys' sake, the kids are all in bed when I'm filming this so that we don't have any interruptions today. But just know that often when I'm doing these baking days, there's all kinds of interruptions, and yet you can still do it, okay? Bring your kids along with you, have them help, and as they get older, start assigning half of this stuff to them. So I am doing this tonight, and we've gathered everything right here to make it easy for you to see, but usually, my grain mill's sitting over there, my bread machine will be in the other room, and, things are just kind of everywhere, but we wanted to make this easy for you to see. So I'm going to go through 7 different recipes today. You are going to have access to all of these, and I'm going to show you kind of the sequence in which I do these to make this the most productive as we're going through. So the first thing we're going to use here, this is my zucchini bread machine, and I'm going to be making a loaf of bread. This one takes the longest of all the recipes because it takes a while to rise and to bake and do all that. But when you do it in the zucchini, it does all the work for you. So you're going to see about 3 minutes, 5 minutes of hands-on work, and then the zucchini does the rest of it while we move on to the rest of the recipes. And then when I wrap up my baking day at the end of the day, the sandwich loaf for the next few days is done, which makes it really easy. The other thing I'm going to show you first is this is one of my small buckets. Most of the buckets I use are the 5-gallon big buckets. This is a 2.5-gallon bucket. This has spelt in it right now. So I'm not going to show you getting all of my buckets out each time. I dragged them all over here. Usually they're in my pantry and I just go get the cups that I need. So just know this is what I'm pulling from is this small bucket and my bigger buckets for my succulent, all of my grains. I will show you, I have amaranth in a smaller jar that I'll show because everybody asks about storage. So I'm just going to skip some of those parts of it to make it faster for today. Alrighty, so for the bread maker bread, you can use a lot of different types of grains. Hard white works fabulous. It's very forgiving. It's very easy to use. You can use hard red, but there's a bit more of a weedy taste to it. My favorite that I use now is spelt, but you can also use einkorn. You can use kind of a combination of other ones as well. So today I'm going to be using spelt for this. And the first step is we are going to be grinding 3 cups of spelt, and that's going to make 4.5 cups of flour. Okay, so in the time it took for the flour to grind, I was able to put the first 3 ingredients in. We've just got hot water in here, olive oil, honey. A really good trick with honey is if you put the oil in here first and then put the honey slides right out. So now I know this is 4.5 cups since it was 3 cups of grain. So I'm just gonna dump my flour in. Okay, next comes salt. Dump your salt in. And if you're used to making sandwich loaf by hand or you're scared of this whole process, then you're going to see how super simple and super easy this is. I like adding an egg to mine. I think it really helps with the consistency. You don't have to add an egg though. You can skip that. There's also the optional, you can put sunflower lecithin in. It really helps. It's an emulsifier, so it really helps the bread have that really amazing elasticity and that good consistency. I hardly ever restock the sunflower lecithin though. So if I have it on hand, I'll use it. I often don't. The other thing you can do if you don't have a gluten sensitivity is you can add a teaspoon of gluten in. Jason really likes to add it in when he makes it. He thinks that it makes it better. I don't feel like I notice a difference, so I hardly ever use it. But it's definitely up to you if you want to use it or not. And then if you have like a gluten sensitivity or you want to stay away from extra gluten, you don't have to use it either. Okay, so I put all my ingredients in. I'm going to make a well in the center, and I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of yeast. I store my yeast in the freezer. I get the big 5-pound bag of it. I store it in the freezer just to keep it its most active form, and then it's super easy to grab. Okay, so that is the recipe. That's how you make it. So you're going to stick it back in here. It's not plugged in. I'm going to move this over. I bake this in another room because I just don't have room in the kitchen. So what I usually do is just grab this out, bring it to the kitchen with me, take it back into the schoolroom, and then I'm going to hit homemade or select course, homemade, and then start. So you hit 2 buttons, and in a couple hours, the bread's going to be done. Okay, so after I have my bread in the bread maker baking, the next thing that I like to do is do several things in the oven that are quick. So anything that's a quick bread is going to be really fast because there's no yeast involved. So you mix the ingredients together and dump it in the oven. So what I like to do is a couple muffin recipes back to back because they're really, really quick and they only take 15 or 20 minutes in the oven. So I can mix together a quick batch of muffins, bake them. While those are baking, I can mix up the next batch so that batch is ready to go in as soon as these ones are out. And it just utilizes your oven space really well and makes it go really fast. So what we're making right now is what I call all year round pumpkin muffins. So these are pumpkin muffins, but I don't think you should just relegate them to the fall because they're absolutely amazing and you can use them, eat them all year long. They're awesome. These muffins, because of the pumpkin in them, they're definitely a more moist muffin, which I love. The kids absolutely love these, and I love these as a really yummy treat. Now, these muffins do have a larger amount of sweetener in them than other muffins because the batter is more like a banana bread batter, where when you make banana bread, the amount of sugar to flour ratio is usually very high. And that's going to be similar in this recipe. So that's why I really love being able to use a natural sweetener like succinate because there is some sugar cane in it, but they're also getting all the amazing minerals and vitamins that are in the molasses. And so just know that there is a lot of succinate in it, but you can play around with substituting out honey, using honey in place or things like that if you want as well. But I adore this recipe as is. So the first thing we're going to do is I am using spelt for this recipe, but because this pumpkin is so flavorful, you can use just about any flour in this recipe. It's going to turn out really good. Like we talked about earlier, muffins and quick breads are very, very forgiving. So it's really hard to mess up these pumpkins or mess up these muffins. I keep saying that. So you can really use anything that you want, but I just love spelt as a really good go-to for anything like this. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to get this flour all ground up. So you can see as that was all grinding, I have made huge progress in getting this recipe underway. We're already almost done. That's how fast these go together. Okay, I'm out of olive oil. I need to grab some more. So one thing to note with this is going to make 24 muffins. You can easily have this recipe and just make 12 muffins. But while you already have all of this stuff out, you baking it for the same amount of time. This basically takes the same amount of time. I figure you might as well make 24. For our family, we'll go through these so fast because as soon as these come out hot from the oven, when I do these during the day, half of them are already gone almost immediately. And I know I have to have one. So you'll be surprised how fast you go through them, but you can also put these in a gallon size Ziploc bag. You can fit 12 of them in here and stick these in the freezer. They do amazingly well. So my philosophy is if you're going to get this all out, you might as well make 24, whether you're going to eat them now or whether you're going to put them in the freezer for later. And they will last a good week or so in the fridge. So that's why I do these baking days about once a week. Okay, so we've got this here. I kind of jumped around because I wanted to get everything going while this was in. So this is my wet stuff. I'm going to go ahead and open up my cans of pumpkin and get these added in. Okay, so this is all the wet ingredients and the succinate that I'm mixing together right now. And then I'm going to measure out this flour. So when I do a lot of flour like this, I'm not sure. I should have a conversion thing out right next to me. I'm not actually sure the exact amount of dry to actually making the flour. So I tend to just guesstimate and I usually end up pretty close. So what can happen is if you end up with a little bit of extra flour at the end, my favorite thing to do is add that flour to a freezer Ziploc baggie and put it in your freezer. So then next time, if you end up a tiny bit short on flour, you can pull this out and use it. You're not wasting any of it. And the best place to keep that is in the freezer. That's going to be the best place because with freshly ground grains, you want to use them right away. But if you don't, go ahead, put them in the freezer. Okay, so I did end up with a teeny bit extra. It'll go in the freezer or it'll go in something that I need next. Alrighty, so I'm mixing all of the dry, probably can't see this very well. I'm mixing all of the dry ingredients together now. Get that all mixed up. And then I'm gonna add the wet ingredients into this. And it's just a wet batter. So it's not a dough or anything. You're just mixing it together. And then we're gonna put it in the muffin tins. So what I want to show you is, hopefully you've already seen these from an earlier lesson, is I am using the USA Pan muffin tins. So you're gonna see when we get to the end how amazing these actually turn out. So I've got my beautiful batter all mixed here. And I actually forgot, I wanted to show you guys, this is the USA Pan mini loaves. And for some reason, I love doing the pumpkin in these because it makes these little mini pumpkin loaves. It doesn't change the recipe at all. You just put them in, bake them exactly the same. And so I'm just gonna bake these ones in here just to show you guys the difference at the end. But here's the amazing thing with these USA pans. You don't have to use any oil in here. You don't have to use muffin liners. You don't have to use anything. They're completely nonstick because they're coated in silicone. So when these come out, they just slip right out. So if you're using any other type of muffin tins, then you're gonna wanna make sure you spray it with some oil or you put those muffin tin liners in or something like that. So I'm gonna go ahead and get these filled. Okay, so these are ready to go in the oven. These just take 15 to 20 minutes to bake, which is perfect. And so while these are baking, we're gonna get started on the next muffin recipe. And here's my tip for baking days, you guys. It's really easy to wanna plow through the baking and just start stacking your sink full of the dirty dishes, but it's gonna be a nightmare when you get to the end and you are exhausted from cooking and you have a million things to clean. So what I highly recommend is you clean as you go. I just use 2 bowls and I need 2 bowls for the next recipe. So I'm gonna wash these. I'm gonna take 10 seconds, do it real fast, and then I will have clean ones to use and still a clean sink. So that's what I highly recommend. So these are gonna cook, these are gonna bake at 350. I don't know if I said that, 15 to 20 minutes. Okay, this next recipe we're making is chocolate muffins that are surprisingly healthy, which is really fun. This recipe is also naturally gluten-free because we are using this. This is amaranth. I basically only use amaranth for this recipe, but you can use it for a lot of other things. So this is a really good one to have on hand, but I typically just buy it in 5-pound bags instead of keeping it in stock in bulk because I don't use it as much. So it is naturally gluten-free. Amaranth is a powerhouse. I think it's technically actually a seed, and it is a nutritional powerhouse. Amaranth is packed and loaded. It is awesome. It's a superfood, but amaranth can have kind of a funky taste at first and a little bit of a funky smell. It kind of has a little of a dirt smell or taste. And so it's a little weird. And I was warned of that before the first time I used it. So my very first muffin, I made this recipe. My first muffin was like, this is kind of weird. But by the time I got to my second muffin, I totally loved it. My kids never batted an eyelash. They all liked it from the beginning. And now I love it. So you have to give amaranth a little bit of a chance if you're gonna try it out. So once again, for this recipe, I'm gonna double it. I'm gonna make 24 muffins, or as the recipe you get is, it makes 24 muffins because these do freeze really well. And I figure you might as well make them, but you can have this recipe if you want. And these, because of the amaranth in them and because of the zucchini and bananas, these are a very moist muffin, which when you're biting into a chocolate muffin, you want it to be that moist deliciousness. You also can add in some chocolate chips if you want to add to that ooey gooiness, and you can also add in walnuts. I add chocolate chips and walnuts to a lot of other recipes. So because this one is already so moist and chocolatey on its own, I just skip both of those personally, but you can use these, make the recipe however you want. I save the chocolate chips for chocolate chip cookies. That's what I save it for. Okay, so first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna get 3 cups of this amaranth grinding. Amaranth is teeny tiny little seeds. And so you may have to make sure that your grain mill is on very, very fine. I know this is the Como Duet 2000. And so this is a top of the line grain mill. It does amazingly well with the amaranth. But if your amaranth is not getting fine enough, you can run it through again. So with my old Nutrimel Plus and my Nutrimel Harvest, especially the Harvest, I think, I had to run it through twice because it only like half cracked them open. And then if you run it through again, you get a finer flour that time around. So you absolutely can do that. Okay, so I'm gonna get 3 cups of this going. Okay, so that was fast. I actually ran out of cocoa, so I had to go find some more. This one's one you can really play with. I like to put about 6 tablespoons in, but if you want to put more like 4, I just kind of figure, you know, you're not going to get too much chocolate in there, so you might as well put it in. And it's unsweetened cocoa powder, so it's actually good for you. Isn't that amazing? That's what I love about these recipes. You actually get to make all this stuff that turns out good for you. Okay, so we've got that. We're gonna make sure we've got 3 cups of the flour here. And this is a really small amount of flour. So in the last recipe, we made 24 muffins. We needed 7 cups of flour. This one only calls for 3. And that's because you are adding the baking powder, the cocoa powder, and we're stuffing it with banana and zucchini and all kinds of stuff. Okay, I didn't quite make enough of the amaranth, so I'm gonna grind up a teeny bit more. Something with like amaranth, I really try hard. I tend to probably always have to make a little bit extra because I don't wanna have to save amaranth in the freezer. You totally can, but I just am too lazy to do that. Oh, that was actually pretty much exactly perfect. That was great. Okay, so we've got the amaranth. We're gonna put baking powder and baking soda in now as well, just 1 teaspoon of each. This recipe, because you have to deal with the zucchini and the bananas, this recipe does take a couple minutes longer than the pumpkins recipe, but this one is so healthy that I just completely find it worth it. Okay, we're gonna put in cinnamon, little dash of cinnamon there. We're gonna add in salt. Okay, we're gonna mix this up. So that's the dry ingredients. Now we're gonna mix together the wet ingredients. So we are going to add in not just the wet ingredients. We're gonna start with sucanate in here. And you can tell like this recipe for 24 muffins only has 2 cups of sucanate versus the pumpkin had 4 cups. Okay, then we're gonna do a cup of olive oil. You can use any type of oil that you like to cook with. Coconut's another really healthy one. Some people don't like how clearly you can taste the coconut in it. So you can experiment with that and use an oil that works well for you. Okay, then we're gonna put in 4 eggs. Next thing is pure vanilla extract. So one quick note on vanilla extract, it has become crazy expensive in recent years because there have been shortages of vanilla beans. Hopefully that's gonna correct itself and come back out. But I started noticing at Costco and places I would get real vanilla extract. It went from like $6 a bottle to like $35 a bottle. And I finally was like, okay, I'm just gonna make my own. So I do have a recipe for you. You can make a couple different varieties of homemade vanilla extract. I've had this batch going for about a year. And you can see I still have quite a bit. So we're gonna add in 2 teaspoons of this and it smells amazing. Okay, so at this point in the recipe is when you would take 2 bananas, lay them down, mash them up with a fork, just get them all mashed. You're gonna add them straight into this. Of course, because I planned out this entire baking day, I have literally everything I need except bananas. I realized it about 10 minutes before filming. So I'm just gonna do this recipe without bananas. I think it's gonna turn out fine. It's just probably gonna be a little bit less moist. But I love sneaking those bananas in there. So I think that's a really good lesson with baking though. There's so many times when I ran out of the flour, I ran out of something, and there's so many good substitutes that you can do. So you know what? Just roll with it. The zucchini is the important, healthy part, right? Okay, so I'm gonna now add the wet ingredients to the dry and mix it all together. Okay, so now I'm flinging batter. Now is the time that you could fold in the walnuts if you want and the chocolate chips. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna make about 2 cups of zucchini. Now I will be honest, I really don't measure the zucchini all that much. So let me actually I'm gonna get my food processor out real fast. Okay, so there's a couple ways that you can do this step with the zucchini. My favorite thing to do is get it as teeny tiny and small as possible so you don't even realize that it's in the muffins. So you can get a cheese grater out, you can grate it. I find that tedious, and then you get these long strips. You could dice it into teeny little dices, but my favorite thing to do is just throw it in the food processor. It is one more kitchen item you have to clean, which I always hate, but it's very quick to clean. You just rinse out the zucchini, it's really fast. So that's my favorite way to do it, is you just throw the zucchini in. It's roughly 2 cups of zucchini. I just kind of throw a couple zucchini in. I'm actually not that particular. Like, this looks about right. So be exact the first couple times you make it so you know what you're looking for. Those are the pumpkin muffins that are done, which means we're right on schedule because we're about to put them in. So I'm gonna get this going and make sure these legs are locked in. And then I'll check on the pumpkin muffins. Oh, and this is not plugged in properly. Okay, I'm having issues because I'm not usually looking backwards. I just have the lid on backwards. Okay, so I'm gonna do that and then check on the muffin. Okay, so I ended up making the pumpkin loaves massive and gigantic. So they're a teeny bit gooey. I'm gonna leave them in for another minute. So now you have this awesome zucchini pulp, which is teeny, 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 tiny, and just blends right in. So I actually ended up making a ton, but that's good, right? More zucchini in. And actually, I don't have bananas in here, so having a little bit of this extra moisture in here will be good. So I'm just gonna then fold in the zucchini, mix it all in, and then it's going right into the muffin tins. And this is where you utilize your time really well because those are coming out and I can put these in. And even if you only have 2 muffin tins, so you have to wait, then, it just takes 5 minutes of cooling before you can pop those right out and get your next ones in. And this does make a very wet batter. This is a very liquidy batter, even compared to the other recipe that we just made. So I'm gonna go ahead and get these filled. Okay, so I evened these up a little bit. I'm always bad at estimating the first time around. I had 2 empty ones, so I took some from the bigger ones and put them in there. But here's a really good tip. sometimes, let's say you want to make some bigger muffins and so you only make 18 instead of 24. What you can do in that case is add a teeny tiny bit amount of water into each of the muffin tins that's empty, and that's going to prevent your muffin tins from browning and burning the empty ones from being in the oven. So perfect timing. Pumpkin muffins are coming out. Chocolate zucchini muffins are going in, and our baking day is just moving along right on schedule. Okay, next up, we're gonna do another quick cleanup and get to the third or fourth recipe. Okay, now we're moving on to the next oven recipe because in about 14 minutes, those muffins are gonna be done and we're gonna be ready to stick the next thing into the oven. So I like to save this one for my last oven recipe because it takes about 35 to 40 minutes, more like 35 minutes to cook. So it's the last one, but it's so worth it. This is cinnamon streusel coffee cake. This is my favorite dessert to make. I love having it on hand. And I love having it as a special treat that I can have at night when the kids are in bed with a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, or I can share it as a special treat with the kids because it is, while it's a dessert and while it has a little bit of succinate in it and a little bit of honey, it's actually really good for you, made with the home ground spelt. It is an awesome recipe and a great treat to have. And I absolutely love the cinnamon and the walnut together. Is amazing. So it's a fairly quick recipe. It is a quick bread, so it comes together fairly quickly. We're gonna make a batter, and then we're gonna make the topping to go on it. So I'm using a little bit of my leftover spelt that we made a little while ago, and all I need is 2 cups for this. So let's go ahead and get this ground. So now that we've got that done, we are on our way. Okay, I had to step away for a minute, which you probably don't realize because we're gonna cut that part out because one of my kids is having trouble going to sleep. That's the way that it goes when you're baking. Okay, so I made the dry flour. Now we're gonna mix together the egg. We're gonna add milk, oil, and honey. So for this recipe, you can really easily use any milk that you want. I tend to use raw cow's milk, but we don't have any, so I'm using coconut milk right now, and it works just great. So if you have a milk allergy or you can't have coconut or whatever, you can use whatever kind of milk that you want to use. We're going to do a 1/2 cup of oil and then a 1/4 cup of honey. So here's what I love about this recipe is in the batter itself, the only sweetener is 1/4 cup of honey, which honey is really good for you. That's it. That's the only sweetener. We're not talking about a white sugar, white flour dessert that you feel super guilty eating. No, this is actually a really good dessert that you can enjoy. I think that's why it's my absolute favorite. Okay, so now I've got my batter all mixed up, and I'm gonna go ahead and put it here in this 9-inch square USA pan, of course. You can use any square pan that you want. But of course, I love my USA because it's nonstick. Just make sure that when you are cutting the pieces out of this, that you use a plastic fork or knife or something. You don't want to use metal inside because you'll scrape the coating off. So the batter is just going to be set aside for now. I'll just put it up here. And I'm going to reuse my bowl I just used so we don't make more dishes. And we're going to make the topping. So we're going to start here with, you can do 3/4 of a cup to 1 cup of the succulent. I like to make a lot of the topping, and our muffins are done, so I'll go grab those in a minute. And then put in my cinnamon with the succulent. You can tell I really like the cinnamon flavors. Okay, so we're going to add in a bunch of melted butter. And then this last step is optional. You do not have to put walnuts in. You could put pecans, you could put almonds, anything you want, but I love walnuts. So you can take walnuts and hand crush them up if you want. But what I love to do is you can throw it in a food processor, or I love just throwing them in my blender so they just pulverize all of a sudden, and then you can add them in. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. I'm also gonna take the muffins out. We had pizza the other night, and a lot of the cheese, we like to use a lot of cheese, and the cheese dripped over. So I can smell that there's some smoke coming out of that. So if you see a big whoosh of smoke, it's from the cheese melting on the bottom of my very clean oven, not the muffins themselves. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and do both of those. Okay, super fast, super easy. And I've got my walnut pieces to add in. All right, so I'm gonna just go ahead and mix up this topping and layer it on over the batter, if I can get all the nuts out of here. And then we're just gonna go ahead and cook this for 30 to 35 minutes. And then this one will be done. And then I'm gonna do my quick cleanup in between. And I'm going to show you the next fun thing is how to make homemade tortillas. Okay, the next 3 recipes that I'm gonna show you are some of my favorites because while there's multiple steps involved in all of them, there's things that you can do while you're making them. And you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay, so first we're gonna do the first steps in making homemade tortillas, which sounds so labor intensive and hard, and it's really not. We're gonna look at making Ezekiel waffles, and then the last thing we're gonna do is homemade pasta. Yes, you can do it simple and you can do it easy. And if you don't have some of these appliances like a pasta machine, don't worry about it. There's really good store-bought alternatives you can get for now. And if you want to one day save up for it, or if you just never want to mess with it to begin with. But these are all stuff that I've slowly collected in my kitchen. So the fun part though is there's multiple steps to these tortillas. They're super easy, but there's a few steps in between. So as we're going to do step 1, and then we're gonna let them sit, and we're gonna do step 1 of waffles. Then we're gonna do step 2, and then back and forth like that. So then all of a sudden you have 3 of these done, which is awesome. Okay, so when I make homemade tortillas, and this that I have right here, it's gonna make about 28 to 32 tortillas, depending on how many you make. Tortillas last a long time in the fridge. They'll last super long in the freezer. So I think if you're gonna go ahead and get the tortilla press out and do all this, I like to make a ton to have on hand. So I don't even do this every week. I just do this when we need a big old batch of tortillas, because the time you're putting in is basically the same whether you're making 1 batch or 4 batches. So you might as well do that big old batch. Okay, so let's talk about grains. Tortillas are very forgiving. You can use a lot with them. Hard white, soft white, spelt, those are all very common good ones. I have done einkorn that work really well. You could do hard red, you could do kumit, however you say it. So you can really do anything, you can really play with it. So today I'm gonna be using hard red because I have some on hand and kind of wanna use it up. So you do use a lot of flour because these are basically, there's only 4 ingredients. You've got, or 5, I guess. You have flour, water, baking powder, salt, and oil. So it's a lot of flour, but we're talking amazing homemade tortillas. And I'm going to show you how to use the tortilla press. And I'm going to show you how to use this to make it simple and easy. So this right here is my Bosch mixer. It is not a requirement to have. If you have a KitchenAid mixer or any other type of mixer, you can go ahead and use it for that as well. The Bosch is my personal favorite mixer, so I love using it for this. But you can also make homemade tortillas by hand really easily by kneading them and then just making them in the tortilla press. So you don't have to have the mixer, but man, does it make your job a lot easier. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and get the grain out. You need 8 to 12 cups of flour, depending on if you're using a hard or a soft. I am using a hard, so I'm gonna have more like about 8 cups of flour. But what I have found with tortillas is that each batch is really its own thing. So as I know now what the consistency should be, not too dry, not too wet, I kind of just start with a base of 8 cups and I just play with it. I don't even really measure by the time I get to the end. I just kind of go, oh yeah, that looks about like what it should. So as you make them and play with them, you'll get to that spot too. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and grind it. Okay, so I've got my flour ground. I just poured the rest of my bucket in. I don't think this is gonna be enough flour, so I think I'll be grinding some more as I start to make it. Okay, so here's how you make it. Super easy. And in the directions, I do have directions for how to do it. Mix it by hand. Basically the same. You're going to mix it in a bowl and then you're just going to knead it by hand. But this thing does the kneading for me. I have a dough hook in here. So all we're doing is we're going to add 4 cups of hot water right into the Bosch. We are going to add in 1 cup of oil. These really are very easy. And the baking powder, and we're done with those. I'm going to turn this on and let it mix just a little bit. Okay, and then we're going to start adding in the flour. We're going to mix it in slowly until a soft dough starts to form. So I'll just turn it on and add 1/2 cup or so at a time. consistency right on the dough. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn this on and I'm gonna let it knead for about 5 minutes. This is why I love doing it in the mixer, because I hate kneading, but you totally can do it by hand. So I'm gonna turn this on, I'm gonna let this knead for 5 minutes. During those 5 minutes, I am going to clean a couple of these dishes, and then I am gonna start grinding all of the grains that I need for the Ezekiel waffles and start getting those going. And then when this is ready, I'll do the next step. So this is where you start to see some of the ping-ponging back and forth. Okay, so what I have here is the beginning of the Ezekiel waffles. I have the dry ingredients mixed together. I have salt, baking powder, and the flour ready to go. I don't know if you can see, but right back here next to my diffuser, I have the waffle maker plugged in. It's starting to heat up. So I'm gonna set this aside for just a minute. And then we're gonna do the next step here with the tortilla dough. So we kneaded it for about 5 minutes, and then it's been sitting here for several minutes resting. So now we're gonna go ahead and take it out, and we're gonna divide it into all of the pieces. So the easiest way to do this to get somewhat equal tortillas is you're gonna want to divide it into 4 pieces, the whole dough, and then divide each of those 4 pieces into 8 pieces. What you can do is you can get, if you want to be really accurate and particular with it, you can get a food scale out. I did this the first time I made them just because I was like, these need to be right. So you can get a food scale out and measure each ball and make sure that they're all somewhat equal. But for tortillas, I find that it really doesn't matter that much. You're cooking them individual anyway. So if some are a tiny bit bigger than others, that's okay. So you can see we have a beautiful dough here that I barely had to do anything for. So I am going to find my dough cutter right here. You can use whatever you want, but we're going to roughly break this into 4s. And then this 4th, I will break into 8 pieces. So what we're going to have then is all of those round little balls. We're gonna cover them with a kitchen towel, and we're gonna let them sit for another, that's the wrong recipe. We're gonna let them sit for another 5 minutes or so. While they're sitting, we can preheat the waffle maker to get that going. I'll show you how to press those. I'll actually bring it up here. And then in between all that, we'll be getting the waffles started. So I'm gonna go ahead and get these all cut up. Okay, so I don't know if you can see on the counter right here, but I have 32 of the dough balls. I'll show you. Here we go. All ready. They're resting under these towels right now. And right here, I have got the tortilla press all plugged in. Before we start pressing, I'll make sure that you can actually see this. So we've got the tortilla press right here, and then we're gonna let that sit for a few minutes. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna finish up the waffles, and the waffles are great because they take a couple minutes in between, so I can ping pong back and forth between these two. So what we need to add in now is the eggs, the oil, and the milk. The great thing with this recipe, again, is you can use any type of milk that you want. I'm using coconut milk today. I typically use raw cow's milk. I used half and half and some water once when I was out of everything. You can really use whatever you want. Almond milk, oat milk, anything you want is gonna work well. This recipe is fairly forgiving, so it's easy to play with. Okay, we're gonna add in 1 cup of water. 1 cup of oil. It's getting late. Okay, 1 cup of oil. And then what I like to do, since this is such a big batch, I like to break up the eggs and get them mixed in a little bit before adding the milk, because otherwise the eggs kind of disappear in all of that liquid. And with this recipe, you can use just about any flour that you want. I absolutely love using Ezekiel flour because it's just amazing. I love using Ezekiel flour. I also think it makes really amazing tasting waffles, but you can use spelt, einkorn, anything you want. And there's also gluten-free varieties you can see in the recipe. Okay, so we're gonna add in 4.5 cups of the milk. And it might feel a little bit liquidy at first when you first put it in, because with freshly ground grains, they too soak up the milk quite a bit, but it might feel a little liquidy at first. So if it feels liquidy, I would just let it sit for a few minutes, depending on, I think Ezekiel does soak up quite a bit of liquid. So if you still feel like this is way too thin, then you can just add in a little bit of extra flour. It's very forgiving. It's not gonna hurt you much. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and get this all mixed up, and I'm just gonna go ahead and throw it on the waffle maker, get the first one going, and then come back and start the tortillas. Alrighty, so I've got the first one cooking there. And now I'm gonna show you the tortillas, which I know is what you're excited to see. Alrighty, so this is my Susina Pro. You can get it at Walmart, Amazon. It's about 65, 70 bucks. So it took me a long time to get this because that felt like a lot to spend on a single item for your kitchen that only has one function. But it has allowed us, since we got this a year ago, we have never bought tortillas. So over the lifespan of it, it's going to be well worth it, and already has been. But I know that price is a little scary. So I actually got it from Walmart because somebody gave me a $50 Walmart gift card. It was very random. And I thought, oh, I know the perfect thing to spend this on. And I will tell you, reviews are super mixed on this model. I got this recommendation for this one from Bread Beckers. I watched a video of them using it. And I was like, okay, that's what I want it to do. But the reviews on Amazon are very, very mixed. And so I was a little bit scared, but I had seen Red Beckers use it and it's what I wanted to do with it. So I decided to take the plunge to use it. And I'm really glad I did. Okay, so what you're gonna do, you're gonna take your dough ball. This is very easy. If you've ever made tortillas by hand, you're gonna be like, what? So you open up your tortilla press, you're gonna stick it in, close it, you're gonna press it for about 2 seconds. It squeaks at you a little bit, and then you're gonna let it cook for about 30 seconds, open it up, flip it over, let it cook for another 30 seconds or so. I may have just pressed too hard. If you press too hard too quickly, it can cause the tortilla to break a little bit. So it's a little bit of a trick. I've got steam in my face. It's a little bit of a trick getting it like to that right consistency. But here's the great thing is I hardly ever make these tortillas because Jason can make these super easy. He can stand in the kitchen, flip them off one after the other while I'm doing the next thing. And it's something that the kids love helping with as well. So especially they can't do it independently on their own yet because it's hot. Oops, I need to flip it. Oh, it turned out great. Look. Okay, so I'm going to flip it and for another 30 seconds. But if you have older kids, man, this is such a good task. They can be flipping the tortillas really quickly before dinner. And it's perfect. And then you have fresh tortillas. And I actually find that this is more convenient because there have been so many times. Here, you want to see? It's very hot still. Beautiful tortilla. Oh! I find this so convenient though, because there are so many times when I'm like, Mexican's like a last minute great thing to do. Let's do Mexican tonight. I always have ground beef in the freezer. I always have dried beans. I always have dried rice. Like, let's just make them. And now with a half an hour's notice, I can also make homemade tortillas to have with it. Okay, I'm going to show you now a close-up of how to press this and how to make it. Okay, so we're to the very final thing, making pasta. I went ahead, hurried up, finished the tortillas. I got the waffles finished, did a little cleanup while I was pinging back and forth between those two. So we're actually like almost completely cleaned and done. So the last thing we're gonna do here is pasta. To be honest, I don't actually often make pasta during my baking days because it's so quick and simple that typically it's 5 o'clock and I've gone, oh, I don't have anything planned for dinner. Okay, well, I have cheese and milk and salt. Why don't I like make homemade mac and cheese? And then I just make this and use it right away. Or if I'm gonna make a homemade soup or, something like that, you can make this pasta in 5 minutes. And it goes really, really quickly. So this is the Philips pasta maker. It does come with, this is for the dry. It also comes with a wet ingredient one. I can't find it. So I'm hoping that at the last second, off the top of my head, that this is the right amount of liquid, but it might be a little bit, it might be double of the amount and I'm forgetting now. So what this is it's 1 egg, the rest of the way filled with water. And this is how easy this pasta maker is. So you open it up and you're gonna add in your freshly ground flour. And yes, you can use freshly ground flour with this. This has a bunch of different heads that you can use. I tend to just am boring and use the same one over and over again. And there's a bunch of other attachments. Like you can even make raviolis. You can do all kinds of stuff with this thing, which is so much fun. Okay, so I'm getting the right amount of flour. So all you do, pour the flour in, put the lid back on. Wait a minute. Okay, there we go. Put the lid back on, and then you're going to turn it on, hit start. It's going to start mixing it. As it's mixing it, there's little holes in this lid up here that I'm pouring the liquid into. And so as it's mixing it, the liquid, the water in the egg is going right into it and mixing it up. The egg always gets stuck in the top a little bit. Okay, so now what it's gonna do, all it's doing is it's turning inside and it's mixing the egg, water, and the flour. That's all you need for pasta. It has a 15-minute timer set. It's counting down to do this amount. But I don't think that, it's not gonna take that, it doesn't usually take that long. So here's the beauty of the machine now. It's gonna mix it until it feels like it's mixed well enough, and then it changes settings on its own, and the pasta starts to come out. All you have to do then is cut it off with, whatever length you want it. But that's it. And you have freshly made homemade pasta with fresh ground grains. And I'm gonna show you guys a close-up once the pasta actually starts coming out in just a few minutes, but it takes about 10 minutes to make a full batch. And the cool thing is that it takes about 10 minutes to make, but when you go to boil it on the stove or add it to your soup, freshly made pasta doesn't take as long as the hard, dry pasta on the stovetop. So I think it's about the same length as opening up a box of pasta, throwing it in your boiling water, because you can just have this on while the water is starting to boil, throw it in, and they only take a few minutes then to cook. So again, this is another investment, but if you really want to make everything in your kitchen from scratch, but not spend 40 hours making homemade pasta, this is a really great way to do it. And you can get really specific. You can make gluten-free pastas that are so cheap. So in the long run, it's totally worth it. You can make gluten-free. You can use sprouted einkorn if you want to get really super healthy. You can really make the absolute best pasta. Oh, it turned off. It's reversing, and then it's going to start extruding the pasta. Okay, and here we are at the end of our baking day, and I have a ton of stuff prepped for the week, which actually for this week works out really well because I'm flying out tomorrow for a conference and I'm gonna be gone for a couple of days. Jason's gonna be here solo with the kids, so he's very happy to have a ton of this stuff prepped. My waffles look like they're leaning and they're gonna fall over. So we have a ton of waffles. These ones are fantastic because they're the Ezekiel, which means like one big waffle for each kid. It keeps them so full. They're awesome, and I love having these for breakfast. We have all of this dessert over here, which I am taking a slice of right now as soon as I finish cleaning up, of the coffee cake. We have got all of these huge pumpkin loaves, which are amazing. We've got the chocolate zucchini muffins, which didn't, because I didn't have the banana and because I was distracted, they didn't turn out as well as they normally do, but they turn out amazing every single time. So as long as you're not filming a video while you do it, you should be good. We've got our sandwich loaf here. It did fall. This is a good thing to see. It did fall a little bit in the middle and actually has fallen a little bit more now that I took it out of the warm bread maker. What this means when it falls in like this, it's fine. The bread still works extremely well. It means that it was rising for too long. So it's over rising, and we just had kind of a season switch. It just got cold for the first time. So I think I need to just reduce those rising times a little bit and play with it. And I usually have to play with it about twice a year to kind of figure out what is working well. So that means it just overrose a little, but the loaf is still going to work perfect. So I actually don't worry about it that much when it's got that little bit of a hole. And then we have all of our tortillas here ready to go. They turned out so good. You can see You can easily wrap up a burrito. I make enchiladas with these, everything. They turn out so good. So now I have a ton of snacks and a ton of things to leave Jason with this week. And hopefully you guys got to see a little peek inside the cleaning or the baking day. And then one thing is make sure that I am cleaning along the way. So I have a bowl and the clean dishes to put away. So at the end of my baking day, all I got to do is get these in Ziploc baggies, get them in the fridge or freezer, and I can go sit down and relax. And I do prefer doing these baking days in the morning rather than at night. But this worked out well to be able to video here with you guys. So you have got all of the recipes for you for this class. So I will give you access to those. And then let me know if you guys have any questions. If you, have questions about this, please let me know. But really what I love doing is being able to layer a few of these things in, like the quick breads, like the tortillas, things that if I can just get in and knock them out one by one, it's really going to be helpful for that baking day to combine them and get all of that baking done. And now I won't bake for another week. So that's the really nice part, is that I probably won't get it out at all. I've got this stuff done for the week, which is so helpful and so nice. Or if I need to just pull it out to do one quick recipe, 20 minutes, I'm done. But having this all in the fridge ready for this week, first of all, helps our grocery budget so much and allows my family to eat organic, good foods that have no preservatives, no chemicals, no white sugar, no white flour, and at a fraction of the cost that you would buy something equivalent, if you could even find it in the store. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Let me know what your questions are. And then once you guys get in the kitchen, start doing your baking days, I want to see them. So please, 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 if you're on Instagram, come tag me, Instagram.com/Jami Balmet. I want to hear from you guys. Okay, now it's your turn to go start baking.